Senior Director of New Business Development and 7 Ventures at 7-Eleven, here to really represent what it means to be that actual retailer, that C-store retailer. And then we have 3 great brands here to tell you about their journey and their experience selling into this channel. So we've got Jessica Karp, co-founder of Hue, which is some delicious chocolate. So thank you, Jessica. Mark Pettyjohn, Chief Seed Enthusiast at Chinook Seedery and SKU alumni. Hello, Mark. Thank you so much for being part of this. And then Ashley Thompson, who I'm just meeting today, who is the founder of Mush, which has been selling in 7-Eleven for a while and is just a great brand, so interesting. And thank you for being a part of this panel as well. So with that being said, we're going to just go over a format of talking with each of these different individuals, kicking it off with 7-Eleven and Marisa, who is doing some really, really amazing things. And so Marisa, how are you? How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. Hello, can you hear me okay?
We're hearing you loud and clear. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I'd love just for you to give a brief introduction on, yourself, what your role is at 7-Eleven, and what you're doing that is even sparking this relationship and conversation from a smaller brand perspective and an innovation perspective.
Of course. It is a real pleasure to be with everyone here today. I'll be candid, when I started working in the emerging brand space, I actually really admired what SKU was doing down in Austin. I am Dallas based, so in the early days of launching this team and building out the mission of working with small businesses, food and beverage brands to get differentiated products on our shelves, I was looking up SKU and your alumni and figuring out how to work with y'all. So this is a relationship multiple years in the making. But to give you background, I'm not a merchant by trade. I actually started at 7-Eleven 7 years ago in a strategy role, helping our senior executives kind of across the board thinking about long-term planning. And when I started working with different senior leaders, I constantly started thinking more and more about how the products on our shelves really drive the customers to our doors. That's not anything revolutionary. But the products on our shelves, we sell on average 2,500 SKUs in an average 7-Eleven store. Yes, there have been changes across the decades, but when you looked at just the product discovery and the proliferation of new brands showing up on the shelves of grocery and natural, I'll be candid, I thought we were behind. And fast forward to where we are today, I lead a team called New Business Development, and within that group, we have emerging brands and 7 ventures. They're separate, but there is some overlap, which I can get into. But we're really trying to incorporate, better for you, more functional, natural products that fuel the on-the-go consumer. We serve 8 million customers every single day in 10,000 stores across the United States. And when you think about 2,500 SKUs versus an average grocery store carrying about 40,000 SKUs, you really think about that's 16 times the number of items that are on the shelf in those different channels, whereas you have a lot more concentration in C-store. And I think if you're creating a product that you want to serve the mass consumer, the C-store channel is a fantastic opportunity to get your products on shelf, to understand if there's demand, and my team is here to work with you to help you along the way to understand how to get into the C-store channel and how to be successful in the 7-Eleven chain. Oh, you're on mute, Chris.
Kirsten, I think we lost your audio. Oh no, we still don't have your audio.
Uh-oh, that's going to be a problem.
Oh, there we go. Got it back.
All right. I'm going to stop hitting that button and just hope that there's no noise from the kids behind me. So thank you for that overview. So I'm just curious about, some of the strategies that 7-Eleven is utilizing to bring this emerging good for you brands into the stores.
Now I'm doing the button thing. Okay, so really what my team is focused on the emerging brand side is really a full cycle of activities that are aligned with the core merchandising, sales plans and launching new items and ensuring that emerging brands are in those paths and have a way to get their products on shelf without going, the national launches, which is common in our channel. And so how I unpack that would be every year we host an emerging brand event. It's actually, we're in the midst of planning our annual event right now, which is why I'm in the office, where we receive now up to thousands of applications from breakout brands wanting to get their products on our shelves. And so from that event, we invite a handful of brands to meet our merchants, meet our buyers, and learn and understand, what 7-Eleven is looking for products on our shelves, what our franchisees are looking for, because we do have a franchisee environment. And then from brands that attend that event, we also put products in tests. So I love that Jessica and Ashley will be speaking today, because I'll let them talk about working with 7-Eleven and getting products on the shelf and testing if there's demand in the C-store space. I rather do that in a small number of stores. We test on average in 200 stores in Southern California. That's easier for the brands. That's easier for us when we're just assessing demand. And then when we think about expansion, we have real data, real customer demographics, real store demographics, and that can help map what expansion looks like for the rest of the country, because sometimes emerging brands aren't available or capable to expand at the rate that 7-Eleven wants. My team works as the middleman to say, hey buyers, we know you want to do X, but the brand can do Y. Or we say from our data, this is kind of where we think this brand could play, whether it's near, universities or dense urban or suburban or whatever those parameters might be. We have the actual real test cases, which Jessica and Ashley can speak to more, that help really kind of chart the way in terms of expansion. And then that all gets integrated to the category managers and buyers kind of tracks so that the emerging brands can be weaved in accordingly. So we do have a process. I hope that it's not as maybe kind of scary or as vague as maybe in the past. We do have a dedicated team working side by side founders so that 7-Eleven and the brands do the thing that's right for you, not only what's right for us as a retailer.
So is this event you're talking about the Brands with a Heart that's coming up in October?
That's right.
Okay. So what sort of brands should participate or should get into your application process? Because, you just hit on a couple of really important things that I would assume our founders and our companies are thinking about. Just, maybe I don't have the inventory or the production capacity. So, where do you want brands to be and who should be kind of leaning into you as an organization to get in front of that team?
That's a great question. Really, Brands with Heart is that open call for brands, big, small, emerging, successful in other channels, but not yet launched in C-store. The aperture is pretty wide because we're really trying to get a sense of what brands, through our evaluation process, what brands would be right to bring in for each cohort, each batch that we bring in on an annual basis. I can tell you, as we're going through the application process this year, a ton of sparkling, both whether it's sparkling waters, whether it's fruit infused waters, whether it's kombuchas, functional beverages. We've had no shortage of products on kind of across the spectrum on there. We've seen a ton of jerky brands. So if you are a founder of a jerky company, really we're looking for what's making you different. What's different from the brands that we're evaluating in that current application, but also the brands that are already on the shelf. What makes you a reason for maybe driving another customer to our door, another customer to the category? So those are all questions that we're asking. But also, you don't have to be in a single serve have a single serve serving size just yet to apply and attend the show. This is a two-way street. You come to the event to learn more about 7-Eleven, what we're looking for, what our strategies are, but we're also learning about you. So I answered that broadly, but it really is an open call for us to use this opportunity to really assess the marketplace rather than spend so much time on an ongoing basis to group it and be smarter about evaluating brands all together at this annual event. And thank you so much, Alyssa, for putting the application link. The application is still live until October 1st. So if you feel like you have a brand and you want to learn more about the C-Store channel, please feel free to apply. And most certainly, we're looking for products that are on trend, that are differentiated, that want to serve the on-the-go customer, but definitely have the ability, whether it's not today, but have the ability to serve that mass consumer.
I mean, that sounds like such an approachable way to really get in front of 7-Eleven as an organization and just even explore this C-Store channel. So let's just kind of break it down to maybe like a bit of a base level. So many emerging brands or better for you brands will find their way into, or they have, Whole Foods and that kind of customer demographic as their target, or, what they're working towards as a company. Tell me about the right brand for a C-Store. What does that look like? Maybe even historically, just to frame a reference for, what, is it right for me as a company?
Sure. So the C-Store channel serves the on-the-go consumer, and that, we're generally speaking, in a non-COVID environment, people are in their cars and on the go. But if you're in an urban setting, you might not be in a car, you might be, in a metro or by foot. But being on the go is ubiquitous with, people with busy lives and wanting to stay fueled. And while there's been so much proliferation and efficiencies and productivities across the board from technology, last time I checked, people eat, 5 times a day and constantly need to drink liquids throughout the day to keep them hydrated. So the good thing about the C-Store channel is that we're never going to be a destination. We are always a stop for people while they're getting from point A to point B. And so when you think about what's the right product for the C-Store environment, I mean, go into your local, 7-Eleven or your local, bodega for that matter. You see a ton these days of, energy drinks, doors and doors of energy drinks or caffeinated beverages. That was not the case 20 years ago. That really wasn't even the case 10 years ago. Look at how many different, water brands exist, in this day and age. Look at how different, we used to have aisles and aisles of candy bars, and now it's, nutritional bars, and, now it's all these, hybrid, we call them snackfection brands. And so there's been a lot of change, and that's been driven by the customer. You are all the founders, and why did you start the companies? Well, there was a problem that you were looking to solve, and you saw a gap in the current category, or, whatever the situation might be. That does trickle down to the C-Store channel, and that does impact the on-the-go consumer. And so there's not really like a one-size-fits-all answer to, what's the right product for the C-Store. I love, Jessica to provide comments there, because I'll be candid, I thought Hue would be a great product for us to test with Hue chocolates, because it's on trend with differentiated ingredients. It can serve people that maybe don't want current offerings, but want the indulgence product. It's premium, which generally one might say, oh, I don't know if I want to buy a premium chocolate, and it's doing well in our stores. And so that's an example of whether it's the snackable, resealable bags, or it's, a chocolate bar, that's resonating with customers in Southern California these days. And I think it just goes to show that it starts with, what does the customer want? They want, good food to keep them fueled while they're, going on their day-to-day in their busy lives.
I can only imagine all of the customer insights that you have operating so many stores with so many SKUs, and just being able to dive deep and see some of the customer trends that are emerging. So, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that
we could talk about the changes in customer behaviors in COVID a different day, but it's been a fascinating thing to watch, just in terms of changes in consumer eating and drinking preferences in these times. And no one has a crystal ball, so we don't know like what's here to stick long term or what's short term. But no one's back in a pre-COVID functioning day to day. So I think it's a little too soon to tell in terms of what are those like lasting long term changes for the C-store environment as well.
2020 has been an interesting year for all of us, but I love some of the statistics that are coming out with just when it comes to beverage and the amount of dollars that are spent, especially with the millennials, on various beverage options during a day. It's pretty fascinating. So I'm going to wrap it up with one last question, and then I'm monitoring the chat feature. If anybody has a question, please put it in there. I promise I will get to them. And then I'm going to move it on to some of our founders. But, there's so much opportunity just for you to expand your SKUs and your offerings to these emerging brands. What are some of the benefits for the actual companies being in a 7-Eleven store?
Great question. Obviously, you as the brand founders on the call, you need to think about your channel strategy and your margins and your profitability. And so I'd answer that question with, if you're a product that has maybe niche ingredients that you're using the natural or grocery channel for product discovery and for consumer education, then perhaps think about, C-store maybe later stage for you. But if you're a product, and, Ashley with Mush can speak to it firsthand, if you're day one wanting to build a product that is serving the on-the-go consumer and building, pricing architecture that day one works for the C-store channel, well, then most certainly, my team should be like, in your consideration set and setting, as a founder, you should be doing a ton of homework in what products are already on the shelves and what other competitors are there. But the answer is the upside potential is, the size of the prize, 10,000 doors, the velocity, anything times 10,000 is pretty large. And if you're not an all-store play, I always say, our X bar, at its height was not in all 10,000 stores, even currently, and so you don't have to be in 10,000 stores to be considered successful. And that's a talk track that we communicate internally on behalf of founders of emerging brands. We talk to our merchants that franchisees that own 1 or 2 stores aren't thinking about all the rest of the 10,000. They're just thinking about, their stores and their local environment. And so if you do really well in 3,000 stores or 1,000 stores, that success is not a one size fits all, but it has to be right for you and it has to be right for 7-Eleven. So, to kind of wrap up like that answer, I would say, know your unit economics, know the margins of the competitors. And I know it's tough because the Cokes and the Pepsis and the Fritos and the General Mills of the world have the scale. And so they get the ability to use that to get, better cost of goods to retail partners, but do your homework. And the last thing I would say is 7-Eleven has thousands of franchisees across the country. Use them as resources too. Talk to them about, what their customers are looking for. Ask them, what are the big traffic drivers in their stores. Franchisee community is very influential, as a whole at 7-Eleven. And while we have a mix of corporate and franchise stores, most certainly success can also be defined by, the relationships that you build within the entire ecosystem, which includes distributors, it includes co-packers, it includes 7-Eleven, and it includes our franchisees.
I love it. Such great information. So I love the questions coming in on the chat feature. So I'm going to start with some questions from Dave just about some of the economics, because, I think the practical aspect is like, is this a right channel for any of the companies that are on the line? So if I have a shelf-stable food product and my price is $1, what would the retail price be if they were in the 7-Eleven channel?
So, I mean, it depends by category. Is it shelf stable, like cookie, cracker? Is it, packaged bakery? Is it, a meal? We have subcategories for each category that we have in the store, and we have different averages. So I would probably need to kind of know a little bit more before I would like comment on like the specifics there. But most certainly, that's kind of where I would ask the SKU community. You work with so many other brands, retailers, the Spins and the IRIs of the world. There's definitely ways to understand the breakdown of even ranges that exist, in my channel and in others.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a salty snack question, but I love the broader, answers you're giving because there's so many companies on the line. What does the success look like for 7-Eleven? What does this mean? Unit, store, week? When do you?
Yeah. So to be candid, we typically look at daily velocities. Beverages turn at a higher velocities than salty snacks. We call that center of the store. Beverages also turn faster than even some of our like refrigerated, snacks. And so there will be higher hurdles for, beverages, and it varies between if you're an alcohol brand or a non-alcohol brand. But those are all conversations that we have, on an individual basis with companies. Because as I said, a hurdle for a salty snack could be very different than a hurdle for, a candy bar, which would be a different hurdle than a kombucha. So it really does kind of vary across the board, but just know that 7-Eleven does think more in daily turns. And I also would go back to, maybe I kind of lean on this too much, but building relationships with local franchisees, they look at the store, on these kind of breakdowns as well. They, an individual franchisee, he or she knows, these are the kind of gross profit dollars that I'm looking for, by areas of the store. So when I think about and talk about, resources at your disposal, obviously, SKU and other, research, groups, most certainly franchisees, would be added into that as well.
Good insight. So I'm going to keep on going with the questions, and I'm going to merge two. So Alexis was just surprised to see 7-Elevens in Japan were so activated. Do you see a shift like this happening in the US? As it being more of a destination versus a stop point? And then also just maybe speak to the product market fit for premium brands that might be more that might be sold in more price sensitive stores.
Yeah.
So talk about what this looks like in 7-Eleven.
It's a great comment about 7-Eleven Japan. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with 7-Eleven's kind of footprint globally. We have over 71,000 stores worldwide. We are the largest retailer by footprint globally. In Japan alone, we have almost, I think it's 40,000 stores. It's something like ridiculously high. That's because a store can be like the size of a closet. On an average kind of major road in downtown Tokyo, you could have like 4 7-Elevens, and you can have them in the bottom of office buildings, and you can also have them like halfway through a high-rise office building. So a very different working dynamic, very different foot traffic, very different customer use occasion. And so I give you this kind of context because do I envision that type of market concentration, saturation of number of stores in a density of area in the United States? No, just because, downtown Tokyo is very different than major metro areas in the United States. Also, the product assortment in Japan is different. They have a very heavy private brand business, and they have 3 tiers of private brand offerings, kind of a value, a mid, and a higher tier. Most certainly, they do sell national brands as well, but it was, 7-Eleven in Japan started 40 years ago whereas 7-Eleven in the United States, the first 7-Eleven opened in 1927. So we're a 90-plus-year-old retailer in the United States. So the kind of positioning that we have as a retailer from the onset was very different in the United States versus when we originally entered in Japan. And so, that could be a whole different discussion in terms of the different approaches we have in different markets globally. But long story short, most certainly we take a ton of learnings from our Japanese counterparts in product development, product launches. I would love to be able to apply so many learnings from Japan, but most certainly the number of stores, I don't think we'd be able to reach in the United States like we have in Japan.
Very interesting. Okay, so you alluded to something a little earlier, and I'm just curious. What are these COVID trends you're seeing? What areas of the stores are popping? Is it, Tomas asked about cookies or crackers. Is it beverages? I'm just curious. What are you seeing?
So Ashley and I were on the phone yesterday and we talked a little bit about this. And I'd love for her to share, Ashley, if you're willing to talk about your performance and your trends that you're seeing from a COVID landscape as well. Originally, well, even to right now, alcohol sales are a huge driver of traffic to our stores. Just globally speaking, we were looking at IRI data and continue to do it on a weekly basis. Every country increased in alcohol consumption except France and Italy. And I personally conclude that's just because they have high alcohol consumption to begin with on a per capita basis. Joking aside, seltzers, beer, wine, spirits, all of that have been, big drivers, not just in 7-Eleven, but across retail. Frozen has been a big growth for us. Frozen is not necessarily a category that gets a lot of spotlight and attention. Generally speaking, in the C-store channel, we on average have about one cooler door of frozen, and then one, in some stores, a secondary cooler that, is you put your hand in to get, a pint of ice cream out or an individual, let's say, popsicle. But frozen has really grown from novelty. Of course, everyone has been increasing across the board in ice cream consumption, in comfort food, but frozen food from meals, pizzas, et cetera, has been something that we've seen. And I'd say the last big trend that we've seen is, the average sizes for C-store are single serve. But when you think about the average sizes for grocery, we call those take home, but they're just the regular grocery size of your, bag of chips. So the take home sizes of that, or the pack sizes that you typically see in grocery for, liter soda, water, 4 packs of drinks, and take-home chips, we have seen, a big increase in customers purchasing those products. Initially, because it was summer and people didn't want to wait in lines. This was our theories to get into grocery stores, and the proximity of C-stores gave customers a reason to kind of go in and use the C-store channel as fill-in grocery. But most certainly now that we have customers come into our doors, we've definitely seen them returning and using us as a fill-in grocery, alternative. And that's one that, I hope it's here to stay. Most certainly, I think it's an important trend to continue to track. And, I think, if Jessica or Ashley can give comments on what they're seeing, most certainly there's a lot of kind of additional specific brand nuggets of information that we can weave into the trends that we're seeing on a macro basis.
hasn't been my dinner of champions a few different times. But let's talk about what these brands are experiencing when they're, kind of partnering with 7-Eleven. And Ashley, you're highlighted on my screen. So we alluded to your relationship with 7-Eleven and these conversations that have been happening. Introduce yourself, your brand, and your relationship in this channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on the call. I'm so excited to be here and help in any way, shape, or form. So I'm co-founder and CEO of Mush. We make a ready-to-eat overnight oats product. It's a grab-and-go item for that on-the-go consumer that Marissa's been talking about. Being serviced in 7-Eleven. And we launched in Southern California, actually in farmers markets originally, believe it or not, which is generally not great for items like our own, but it was a super great way to get a ton of customer feedback on the product. That's when we discovered, yes, this absolutely resonates with people who are on the go, busy, needing quick fuel to give them that boost either in the morning or a midday snack. And it's so important to understand what customers are saying about your product, how they're experiencing it, and what feedback they have for improvement before you really start to scale. So that was super formative. And after farmers markets, we tackled mom and pop shops in the area. So a lot of coffee shops, cafes, athletic clubs, again, these places where people were going to and from in between, working out, et cetera, sort of that on the go lifestyle. And once we built up a large enough customer base, we brought on a local distributor in the area to help us build the momentum we had in the region. And that local distributor, it's a DSD, a direct store distributor. They're smaller distributors who service these mom and pop shops. They're really wonderful, such a wonderful network for emerging brands because they help with merchandising, they help with customer relationships. That local distributor started to sell us into accounts like 7-Eleven. They had those franchisee relationships built in already, so they were able to show the product, get it on shelf, and test it. We were apprehensive at first just because we didn't know if we had enough brand awareness to really make it in a big C store like a 7-Eleven, but it worked from the get-go. I think just because the product and the problem that it's solving fit so well with the customer and the solutions they were looking for at a 7-Eleven. So our DSD partner put us in more and more to the point where we had 150 points of distribution in 7-Eleven stores in San Diego, almost not doing very much at all other than partnering with this DSD. And our movement sort of hit those benchmarks that I think Dave was asking about in the chat, and they are very specific to the particular segment or category that you're in. And that's when we got noticed by 7-Eleven corporate. We were invited to apply to the Emerging Brand Summit to learn more about their initiatives and how we can partner in a more meaningful way. And it's just been so rewarding. We now launched in an additional 200 stores in LA, again, hitting sort of those benchmark thresholds for what success looks like in a C store. And it's just grown so organically, which I think is really important. As a small brand, you have limited resources. You want to make sure that you're pursuing the most fruitful avenues to make the most impact for your business. And we didn't have enough data or confidence at the time to say this is absolutely going to work, but we tested it in a really reasonable manner. Again, what Marissa was alluding to before, slowly and organically matching the size of growth with our business and our needs and strategy. So it's been wonderful.
That's amazing. So it didn't sound like C stores were always going to be within your channel strategy. So how did you have to adopt your business and what you were doing to make sure that being a part of a C-store channel and working with all these distributors was going to make sense financially and operationally for you?
Yeah, I think so. It's actually, we always wanted to go into the C-store channel. Like our vision is to service the mass consumer who is frequenting a 7-Eleven. So both from a cost and a distribution perspective, it was always, we've always looked at our pricing architecture to say, okay, how do we get our COGS down enough to actually hit price points that are accessible in these different channels, given the margin requirements? So it was always sort of part of the strategy, and we're always marching towards that. We just sort of did it slowly but surely. It wasn't like, complete focus on 7-Eleven and setting up pricing architecture around it so that it's going to be a swimming success from the get-go in a really major way. It was more so us crafting the business around the end goal of getting into it and making it a success, but doing it in a way that was actually feasible, smaller goals and sort of accomplishing them over time. To partner with C-stores, you need to be really strategic about how far and how fast you go. And we thankfully figured out a way to pace our expansion with the demand for our product and our size of business. And I think that's really what's made all the difference. And we've sort of adjusted as the opportunity has come, which I think being flexible and adaptable, especially in this COVID environment, is so important to anyone's success from an emerging brands perspective and entrepreneurial journey.
I think being adaptable in 2020 is just like absolute requirement, no matter who you are.
Totally.
Honest. Okay, so be candid with us. Maybe Marisa put some earmuffs on. What are some of the pros and cons of like playing in this channel space?
Yeah, so I mean, Marisa hit it best before. 7-Elevens are everywhere. 10,000 doors in the United States, 8 million customers. Like, raise your hand if you haven't been to a 7-Eleven store. Like, I can't imagine anyone on the call hasn't been to one already. So they're highly trafficked stores with tons of brand awareness, and they really are servicing on-the-go consumers. So if you make anything for the on-the-go consumer, like, you should absolutely be looking into partnering with C-stores and making sure that you're setting the business up for success from a pricing architecture and bandwidth perspective. And so, and as Marisa noted, 10,000 stores times 1 unit a day, like, you can do the math. If you do well, it's a huge opportunity, huge opportunity, really big business, 7-Eleven and others. The cons are really, and they're sort of cons across food and beverage in general. Distribution is a little more complicated. So for instance, when you launch nationally at a place like Whole Foods, for instance, unless you're doing it region by region, you go through one distributor, UNFI, and you ship out to several different DCs, and sort of you have this one counterparty from a financial perspective, from a logistics perspective. But with these different regions in 7-Eleven, especially if you're rolling out more slowly, you have to figure out and be creative with the way the product gets to shelf. So that's one thing. And again, it just sort of requires some additional bandwidth and some creativity at times. I know Marisa and I were talking about it yesterday, how to tap into some of these other markets, getting really creative, leveraging our existing distribution in those markets to see if it could work. And I think we've found some great solutions. And then also just merchandising and take rates can be challenging for small brands with limited resources. We make a ready-to-eat oatmeal. It's a new category. And when you're building a new category, you really need to make every effort to get the customer to understand quickly what your product is, what its value proposition is, and its use occasion, which is so important. And that can be incredibly challenging to do if you're merchandised next to the wrong product. So for instance, one of our partners in the Midwest, not in C-store channel, put us into the deli category next to lasagnas. So for the first time, customers are discovering us and we're next to ready to eat lasagna. It's sort of mixed messaging and really difficult to drive that trial if customers are discovering the product in a way that doesn't really make sense for the use occasion. And given that our product is breakfast, lasagna and breakfast don't go hand in hand, it can be quite confusing. And I think you can find that often in C-stores. There's such tight space. The planograms are not uniform across even franchisees. And so you just need to be really, you need to be on top of it, work with merchandisers to get support. There are some third-party folks out there who help with that significantly. And so they're more so watch outs, not necessarily cons. You just have to work around them.
That was such great specific insight. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to turn it over to a brand, not like ready to eat oatmeal, but something you really expect in a C-store, which is seeds, sunflower seeds. So Mark Pettyjohn, SKU alumni with Chinook Seedery. Love for you to introduce yourself and what your brand is.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on the call. Excited to be here and hopefully shed some light anywhere I can. But Chinook Seedery, we launched the brand in March of 2015. At that time, we really focused on the natural channel. We kind of wanted to go where our competitors weren't. And then over time, just realized, this is such an iconic category in convenience that in order to get the company where we wanted to go, where we think it can go, we needed to compete against the big guys in convenience. So we made that pivot, made some changes to the brand, our messaging, made it more C-store appropriate, so to speak. But I've, live in Austin. I've got a daughter, I've got another one on the way within a couple weeks. Went through SKU a few years ago, a little over 2 years ago. Met a lot of great people that I still leverage and communicate with to this day. But it's been a great ride. I didn't have any CPG experience before we launched the brand, but I've certainly got some since then, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, it's been fun watching you grow and really develop such an interesting product. So let's talk about some of the challenges you had in securing product placements in convenience stores, because there are some really iconic brands in the sunflower seed space.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marisa already touched on a few of the things that I think of when it comes to that. Really, if you look at convenience, a small format convenience store may have as little as 500 SKUs, larger format as many as 6,000 or 7,000. Whereas in grocery, you're looking at 40,000 to 60,000 SKUs. So getting placement in those stores, I'm not going to say it's easy, but the category managers, the buyers are a little bit more open to innovation, allotting a shelf space or some shelf space on an emerging brand, taking a risk on future upside, I guess. So, given that our primary focus in terms of retail is convenience, we just have to take that battle each day. Beyond that, if you look at the category, it's really dominated by the conglomerates, right? So if you look at the top two brands, it's owned by ConAgra. Number 3 and number 4 brands are owned by Frito-Lay. So competing against those guys is a challenge. They do a nice job using their muscle to kind of protect their shelf space. So we just have to be innovative, scrappy, rely on our product, and really do things that they won't.
So how do you get new customers? Like, what are you doing to, drive trial in C-stores?
So about 7 months ago, we launched a shipper display program, and we've actually got about 700 of them heading to 7-Eleven stores come November. Extremely excited about that. But in terms of driving trial, that's where we've had our most success. If you can get a display in a convenience store, virtually every person that walks into that store is going to be introduced to your brand, right? And if you're a sunflower seeder, you're going to give the new brand a shot just out of curiosity alone. So the shipper program has been what we really push to drive trial in store. If we don't get the opportunity to get one of our shippers in there, we rely on shelf talkers, clip strips, promotional tags, anything we can do to kind of bring awareness to our product, set it apart from other items on the shelf.
So one of the questions bubbling up in the chat feature is about price promotions. How important are they for you? And, how have you kind of analyzed it from a profit perspective?
Right. So it really depends on the account. In a handful of accounts, we'll just kind of set a rebate, an ongoing rebate, or an EDLP, everyday low price, and just kind of let it ride on the shelves. And if the product's performing well and the buyer's happy with the performance, we may just leave that program in place and not touch it for the entire year. If we need a lift in certain accounts, or really think we're kind of missing some sales that would benefit from more brand awareness, we'll run a monthly promotion, something like that, maybe be really aggressive with a BOGO to kind of get a lift, and hopefully a sustainable lift in sales in that particular chain.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Now, okay, so just last question about using all of this data that you're talking about, how are you using the data to strategically plan for, increase in distribution? What are you looking at? How is that affecting, where you're going?
Sure. So we're not quite at the point where we're spending big dollars on nationally and syndicated data, right? We're not investing in IRI or a significant amount of funds in IRI or Spins or Nielsen or any of the others. Our most useful data has come from our internal data or something that's been supplied to us by one of our retail partners. So if we've got a handful of stories, really compelling data-driven stories where you can see our month-over-month growth, and you can see kind of this tipping point where maybe in month 14 after having entered those stores, in a lot of cases, we've actually started outselling our big name competitors in terms of velocity. So our most useful data has been specific accounts where we can show our success.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Mark. And there's a lot of questions coming in, but I want to make sure I get around to all of these great brands. And Jessica, hello, Hue chocolates, and so much more. Some of the questions in the feed are all about the salty snacks. There seems to be a lot of those. And I know that you even have a line extension there, but why don't you introduce yourself and your brand? And thank you again so much for being here with us.
Of course, excited to be here. Except I'd rather not look at myself. I can do that. Okay. Anyway, I'll figure it out. So I'm Jessica Karp. I am one of the co-founders of Hue, which is a better for you paleo vegan snacking company. We were founded in New York City in 2011. We actually started with a restaurant, a paleo inspired restaurant focused on unprocessed foods. And we started with chocolate bars in the store roughly 3 months after we opened the restaurant, because we needed to develop a chocolate that we could bake with in our baked goods. And there weren't any products out there that we found that met our specs. So no refined sugar, no soy, no dairy. So we created our own. And when we did create that product, we realized it was something really special and started selling it in our stores. And then around 4 months later, we were lucky enough to have our first third-party retailer be Whole Foods Columbus Circle in New York City. And we've grown from there. And now we have 9 chocolate bars, chocolate-covered nuts called Hunks, chocolate chips called Gems, and grain-free crackers, which is the line extension you talked about before.
Well, you're building out quite the portfolio of brands, and I'm just curious, like Hue is such a premium product. It's talking and hitting so many trends in the better for you space. It's not something I would necessarily expect to come and to be part of like the C-store channel. So what made you decide to take this direction?
So since inception, we've heavily focused on the natural channel and then grocery as well. And we've seen growth in both of them over the past 8 years. But now we really want to expand our reach and get Hue into the broader masses, not just the people who are shopping at Whole Foods and Sprouts, not just the people, of course, we still want those people, but not just the people who really care about health and wellness and are actively searching for those types of products. Part of Hue's larger mission is to help people get back to human. That's one of our slogans, and eat more real food. So finding ways to reach a broader mix of people through alternative channels like C-stores is important for us. And actually we've recently hired a full-time person to drive sales into alternative channels, including C-stores. People are looking for so many different ways to buy right now. And, particularly during the pandemic, which was touched upon earlier, people really want ease of access. They want to get in and out of a store. They don't necessarily want to do a whole grocery shop or go into a grocery store if they need one item. So going into a smaller store, like a C-store, like a 7-Eleven, makes a lot of sense for us. And as these types of C-stores are broadening their mix of products, including higher end and healthier food choices, because that's what the market is demanding and what customers are demanding, it makes it compelling for a product like ours to be part of that mix.
That's awesome. So do you have any concerns about channel conflicts?
Honestly, we don't. I think it's important to showcase our products in various types of stores with different buying opportunities. You know, as I just said, consumers are shopping in traditional grocers, but again, there's now this resurgence of small format local stores. Somebody talked about that before, that people don't necessarily want to make, you know, go far to a destination. They want to go to whatever's most convenient for them, whether it's, you know, bodegas or gas stations or pharmacies or specialty stores and other convenience stores and C-stores. So as these stores elevate their game in terms of products, you know, we're in really good company, you know. And so the more that people see our products, whether they see it, you know, first in a grocery store and a Whole Foods, and then they see it, you know, in 7-Eleven, you know, maybe eventually they're going to say, oh, I've seen Q chocolate before, you know, maybe I should just buy one today. And so maybe they'll just kind of throw it on the counter and drive trial in that way. And I also think that C-stores in particular tend to promote trial through impulse buying, because, you know, if someone's in a grocery store, they might not be by the chocolate aisle, for example. And so they might not even see our bars. Whereas if you're in a smaller store, you're going to see it and maybe grab it. And there's just more buying opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, you're really connecting a lot of dots, right? You know, if there's awareness of your program in Whole Foods and it seems to kind of be blessed there, then they see it in a convenience store. It kind of has that halo effect from, you know, being, you know, maybe first point of exposure being at one of the grocers that we associate with Better For You. What are you looking at when it comes to trends in C-stores, and how do you know that people are really choosing these healthier options?
Well, you know, I think it's funny because I remember the first time I saw a gluten-free product in CVS, for example, I couldn't believe it and it felt out of place. I don't know how many years ago that was. That was maybe 5 years ago. But now seeing those types of products and products that I would say are similar to Hue products in C-stores, in pharmacies, in CVS and 7-Eleven and all these other types of C-stores, you can tell that it's because these stores are following trends, right? So you see these trends and you see people wanting to buy healthier food, and so that's why all these stores are following suit. So, you know, for us, we want to drive our own customers to purchase in, you know, 7-Eleven and the like. So from our standpoint, when we launched this program roughly a little over a month ago and got into 7-Eleven, you know, we did our part by posting on social, and we want to get our loyal fans and customers excited to go see our product in different types of stores in 7-Eleven. So it's exciting for us to be part of this kind of growing trend of healthier products, you know, in lots of different type of retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so let's talk about your journey getting into 7-Eleven. I think this is, it's so fun because I remember actually having a dinner with you right before you went to 7-Eleven for their Brands with a Heart event. And I was just like, wow, there's so much innovation going on there. So tell me from like a brand perspective, it was just 1 year ago. What did that look like? And what advice do you have for brands that are considering applying for this?
So 7-Eleven approached us, which was great, and we were super excited about it. Like I said, we just hired somebody for the alternate channel, so we were kind of we've been thinking about selling into these types of stores a lot as a growth opportunity. But so they invited us to be a part of this event, and I really didn't know what to expect. I've obviously been to trade shows before, but it was a really awesome event because it was small. And we met so many employees from 7-Eleven who were trying all the products. And I think, you know, to me, it was really exciting because a lot of the people there, whereas when you go to trade shows like an Expo West or something, a lot of people obviously have not heard of our products, but a lot of them have because they're health and wellness focused. Whereas this was kind of a broader representation of, you know, people who shop at 7-Eleven, a broader mass, the mass consumer. So it was really exciting to get to talk about our product, explain the differences and you know, why our chocolate is a premium brand and what makes our product special. And it was just exciting for people to just love our product and whether they care about health and wellness or not, be excited about the product. So to us, it was really great because we thought this is a great opportunity for us to approach a lot of different types of people.
That's so great. Well, if anyone hasn't tried Hue chocolate, my favorite is the puffed quinoa chocolate bar. It is so incredibly delicious. Pick it up at a 7-Eleven near you. So thanks, Jessica, for giving us kind of that perspective and getting into 7-Eleven. And I want to just, make sure that this feels like a town hall and we're addressing all the questions that are popping up. So Marisa, there's quite a few directed at 7-Eleven. And so maybe let's just start off with this event coming up you have. There's been some questions from the audience. One, are any brands too big? And are there any tips that you have for brands applying for this?
I'd say a brand would be too big if you've already met with the buyer and the buyer said no, and that you're going to try to use this as a way to get in with 7-Eleven. I mean, joking aside, if you're already kind of graduated from a certain sales position where you have like brokers that already introduce your products to our buyers, or we've like already been through, not my team, but our counterparts in merchandising that have already been introduced to the product, I would say this emerging brand showcase is probably not for you. So from that standpoint, I would say to continue to, reach out and build that direct relationship with the actual like buyers. And a way to think of that even further would be, if you're ready to go in 10,000 stores, then you're not an emerging brand. And oftentimes when brands say, oh, but we haven't entered C-store, or we entered, a couple years ago and ready to come back, which is totally fine. We're always open to retrying products. But again, if you're able, production wise, and you're capitalized to, if 7-Eleven were to say, okay, in 6 weeks we're launching nationwide, and you can do that, then as I said, you're not an emerging brand. So use that kind of questioning process, and by all means apply, but you might get a note back from us to say, please just, maintain dialogue directly with the buyer team.
So another question about international, it sparked a lot of chatter. And I think what you were describing about the Asian market, and I think Japan specifically, was really interesting. So if there's an emerging brand that might have international potential, is that something that you facilitate?
By all means, in their application, please have them apply to Brands with Heart and just make notes in terms of, we resonate in fill in the blank country. I would just ask the brand to do the homework and know if 7-Eleven has operations in that country. We only have licensees in 17 countries worldwide. So while we're the largest C-store, or the largest retailer by store count worldwide, we're actually in a small number of countries. And most, I'd say, in terms of the emerging brands where there's equivalent of an emerging brand ecosystem, I would say our stores in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, the Scandinavian countries do have a growing emerging brand community. We actually had a brand that did well in Scandinavia apply and attend our Brands with Heart last year, just as an example of staying close and connected with our international licensees. But, most certainly just add those comments if a brand's already resonating internationally, or if a brand feels like they would do well in a country in which we have operations in.
Wonderful. Great insight. Okay. So question on just the actual store format. In other countries, there's an importance on-premise consumption, which is often use the help of microwaves, which are on-premise. This kind of opens up what a person would typically get out of a C-store from, maybe some of the companies and brands that are represented here, to something that might be in the cold or the frozen category. Do you see this as important, or a growing use case that 7-Eleven might do more broadly across their C-stores?
That's a great question. So we actually do have microwaves in most of our stores in the United States today. I'd say it's more common in the stores that have gas stations, so a fuel component. And that's typically because when people, come to fuel up, let's say they want to also fill up, heat up some food and get a drink while they're, putting gas in their car, most certainly there is opportunity, to use the microwave, whether you make a purchase or not in 7-Elevens today. But I do see a huge trend in consumers coming to our stores to be able to buy products in that refrigerated area, whether to heat in 7-Eleven or it remains cold and just to eat on the go. Refrigerated snacks, whether it's, a brand like, what Ashley's building with Mush, or just to other snacks in general, kind of in those growing new categories, I do believe are here to stay. What I think is really interesting is brands, if it needs to be heated, or if utensil needs to be used, I would say think through the entire customer experience, not just shopping experience and where the product is merchandised, but actually how do you eat it while you're on the go? And whether you're on the go as a consumer driving or, getting on public transit, just thinking about just the actual consumption side of that user experience, I think is really important. And, Ashley can speak to that firsthand because she has a little spoon on the inside of her lid, which I think is really important for customers that are eating the products, in their cars while they're driving, to work or to, in the carpool line or whatever it may be, from the gym to the gym. Those are all important kind of consideration sets when you're really wanting to hit home that convenience play from a packaging standpoint.
Yeah, I think this is one of like the core philosophies that we teach throughout the SKU program, which is like, keep your customer at the core center of what you're doing and how you're building it out. So understanding your customer use case is so important for brands to figure out, if this channel is right for them. So I am going to just open it up for the next few minutes for questions. So please bubble it on into the chat feature. But Ashley, maybe just to kind of tag along from what Marisa was saying, how did you go about thinking about your product and making it convenient for the on-the-go consumer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there are a lot of overnight oats products coming to the market, but a lot of them require preparation the night before or the soaking process. So we knew from the get-go, we didn't, the product was sort of birthed with this thought of like melding health and convenience together, not sacrificing one for the other, because it's so often they so often are. It's either really convenient but sort of unhealthy, or really, really healthy but terribly inconvenient. So from a prep perspective, we didn't want customers to have to do anything: cook it, heat it, mix it, bake it, what have you, microwave it. And we achieved that through utilizing technology, which was incredible. And then the actual product format, we did go with a custom cup with the spoon and lid underneath it, because again, we knew that this was meant for the on-the-go consumer. We saw the product living in convenience stores, gyms, coffee shops, and so often, or just even grabbing it out of the fridge and heading out the door. And so often we want these sort of spoonable breakfast items. But the inconvenience of trying to find a spoon sort of leads folks to gravitate less toward those types of products and more towards a protein bar, let's say. And that might not be preference, just so much convenience. And so we wanted to eliminate that. We wanted customers to just lean into the product, and we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. Like you noted, putting the customer first, not only from an ingredient perspective or innovation perspective, but just from like a user experience perspective is so, so important. And that's what we attempted to do with the product format, both in terms of what's inside and then how it's the vehicle for it.
So great. Now, Jessica, I have a question for you. I know that you're so on trend with what you're doing, and you did your first expansion outside of chocolate into some crackers. What are you, as you track your consumer, how are you building out your brand, and what does your kind of crystal ball say for, future opportunities?
You know, interestingly for us, you know, like I said before, we started with a restaurant, and we started the restaurant because we couldn't find a place that we wanted to eat in New York City that kind of met our own needs. And we kind of look at products the same way. So chocolate, we needed to create our own chocolate because we couldn't find one that worked. And then same thing with chocolate covered nuts, because usually chocolate covered nuts have something called shellac on it, which is a bug resin. We didn't want any of that. So we created that product. Same thing with the crackers. We wanted to create crackers that were consistent with the philosophy of Hue. So when we're looking, not that we are the crystal ball of what kind of trends are, but we really look to, you know, what do we see obviously in the community, but what are we looking for? What do we want to be eating that isn't available? And that fits kind of within our parameters. So a lot of times it's comfort foods like crackers. I mean, I used to eat wheat thins growing up as a kid. And then we couldn't really eat crackers anymore because we were paleo, or usually paleo. And we really still wanted to have crackers, whether as snacking or, you know, when we had cheese and crackers and crudité and things like that, if we entertained. So we just often look at kind of where do we see a gap in kind of a healthier version of things that have brought us joy in terms of eating in our life.
I love it. You are the consumer that you're keeping front and center. I like that. Okay, so we got some really good questions in the chat feature, and so kind of back to you, Marisa. One, how does the food service aspect of 7-Eleven work? Blenders and Bowls was a company that went through our program last track in track 8. And I think it'd be amazing to see it in a Slurpee machine. I think you were spot on, Alyssa, when you said that. But I'm just curious to know, like, I know there's a hot section to it. Like, how does that fit into the overall emerging brands, or is it addressed?
Yeah, so most certainly we've evaluated products that would ultimately live in the, you know, hot foods case, or we've evaluated, you know, soda brands that would be dispensed through our fountain soda. So yes, those products are also in our kind of open call consideration set for brands with heart. To be candid, those would be tested separately than the test that Hue and Mush are in right now, because those wouldn't be able to go in, let's say, like 200 stores, you know, in the same setup process that we do with other emerging brands tests. Those would probably need to be like smaller and more isolated, with a lot more of my team's kind of support in executing those pilots and partnerships. We also have meetings with all category managers on a regular basis to understand, you know, what are the trends that they're looking for. And as just in general, because we have a great network and community in the emerging brand world, if there are ever any, you know, new products launching, even outside of this annual event that we have. And the hot foods team is actively seeking, you know, differentiation. And so, you know, some things that we've considered in the past that, I'll be candid, you know, my team has kind of halted just because there's, you know, a QA component if you have, you know, a vegan offering, and, you know, the space was previously, you know, cooking, you know, we call them big bites, but otherwise known as hot dogs or taquitos. And so there's a lot of kind of outside of just the actual product that we need to think about, but most certainly, I would say, just as I was thinking about making comments about the customer eating experience and thinking about that in your full consideration set, not just a path to purchase, but, you know, path to consumption, I would say go into 7-Eleven stores. We use kind of bake in-store kind of ovens, and they're pretty standard in not just our industry, but in, you know, Starbucks and Dunkin's and, you know, other locations. So familiarize yourself with what like the current limitations are within our system. And, you know, if you have a product that could be crafted that kind of fits the existing path in which we, you know, we hold frozen, we hold, thaw in store, all that kind of stuff. So familiarize yourself with how the current existing assortment gets, brought to stores and then cooked and then stored and then sold. But most certainly, if you have something that kind of fits that path, there's a lot of conversation that we could have in the food service space.
Very insightful. And kind of on that, let's explore outside of maybe the typical shelves that we were talking about. We were talking about a lot of food, but personal care. How does that fit into your Brands of the Heart and just what you're doing or what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have not invited, non-foods to the event before, not because we haven't received applications, but it was mainly driven by, we didn't want to just have like one or two, brands there and not have enough kind of density, if you will, for it to make sense. But as someone that goes to the expos of the world and attends trade shows and tracks trends, there is so much innovation happening in the health and beauty space and in the personal care space and in just non-foods that also have a place in 7-Eleven stores. So I would say, from our standpoint, just because we haven't had that type of categories attend our annual emerging brand showcase, that does not preclude us to do it either this year or in subsequent years. We just want to do it right. And we do want brands to feel like there is a path to get onto our shelves, because that's so important to founders in engaging and investing in time and building relationships with us as a retailer. And to be candid, I think you need more than just like one or two products to have to showcase that there's something different happening in those parts of the store, in those aisles and I think that will take some time.
Well, you guys have done a ton of innovation thus far, so maybe it's just like a 2024 project. Thank you guys all. I'm gonna just end with one last pretty optimistic question for Mark. I know you're about to hit, how many stores of 7-Eleven?
About 700 of them.
700. What are you excited for? What are you nervous about? How do you think this is gonna, change maybe this wild year of 2020?
Yeah, and all of those 700, or at least about 640 of those, will be within Texas. I won't say that I'm nervous about anything. We've got a lot of brand awareness here in our home state, and we're really confident we're going to go in there and have a lot of success, then expand from there. But we're just excited. It coincides with a couple other big launches. We're going into HEB as well here shortly, so it's a good time to be part of the Chinook team, and we're just very pleased to have 7-Eleven as a partner, because we know the sort of potential that we have with working with them.
That's amazing. Own your backyard. Texas is a big backyard to have. All right. Well, thank you again to everyone for tuning in. I think this was such like an insightful, informative panel. Marisa, Ashley, Jessica, Mark, you guys are rock stars. Thanks for showing up and giving us your words of wisdom. And thank you guys all for attending and staying online throughout this presentation. So